Welcome back, troops. Thanks for tuning in. We're diving into part 2 of our 3-part series. Our journey today takes us into the life of Pastor Dave, a man who, despite his faith, found himself in a battle for his life. Pastor Dave, at the age of 39, was slapped with a diagnosis that would shake any soul: acute myeloid leukemia. After enduring the grueling rounds of chemotherapy, he was left frail but hopeful. However, just when it seemed like he was getting a break, life threw him another curveball. Something happened that turned things for the worst. Now his body, already weakened from the chemotherapy, was not strong enough to undergo the life-saving surgery he urgently needed. His body was betraying him. The chemotherapy that was supposed to save him from cancer had left him vulnerable to a new threat. His white blood cell count, which is responsible for fighting off infections, was dangerously low. His platelet count, which is vital for blood clotting, was also depleted. In layman's terms, surgery was out of the question. But without it, Pastor Dave was facing a death sentence. His wife Sherry, who had been by his side every step of the way, rushed to the hospital and called everyone they knew to come immediately. It was a race against time, a race that seemed impossible to win. And yet, in the midst of this grim situation, there was a glimmer of hope, a whisper of a miracle, a faith stronger than fear. So how on earth did he make it out alive? Despite the fact that he was terminally ill, a church member reassured him with a very special verse of scripture. This scripture was brought to him by Franny, a devoted member of his congregation. Franny was known for her unwavering faith and strength, even in the face of the most daunting circumstances. She had a gentle, reassuring presence, like a lighthouse guiding ships safely through stormy seas. On this particular day, she came to Pastor Dave's side. In the sterile, clinical atmosphere of the hospital room, her faith-filled presence was a welcome contrast. As she held his hand, she looked into his eyes with a certainty that was both comforting and mystifying. "Pastor Dave," she began, her voice steady and calm, "I'm not sure what this means, but you will discover that the Lord is your shield. It may be a hymn or something from the Bible. All I know is that He wanted me to tell you." The words hung in the air, a beacon of hope in an otherwise dire situation. Pastor Dave recognized the verse. It was from one of David's Psalms, "You are a shield around me, O Lord." It was a scripture that spoke of God's protection, of His promise to be our refuge in times of trouble. But Pastor Dave was struggling to make sense of it all. He was wrestling with the reality of his condition, of the seemingly insurmountable challenge that lay ahead. He was in the throes of a battle that, humanly speaking, he was unlikely to win. Franny's message was a lifeline, a divine beacon in the darkness. But could it really be true? Could he, like the biblical David, find protection and healing in the Lord? It was a concept that seemed to belong to a time of miracles and divine interventions, a time that felt far removed from the harsh realities of his present. But those kinds of miracles, the big biblical ones, they just didn't apply today, or so Pastor Dave thought. Then this fatal curveball ruined everything. His appendix burst. A sudden, unexpected twist, like a cruel joke played by fate. Pastor Dave's body, already weakened from the relentless bouts of chemotherapy, now had a new battle to fight. The rupture of his appendix, a life-threatening emergency in the best of scenarios, presented a critical challenge amidst his compromised immunity. His body, stripped of its natural defenses by the harsh treatment, was ill-equipped to fight off the infection that ensued. His blood, lacking in platelets, refused to clot, making the necessary surgical intervention an impossibility. It was a grim situation, a dire prognosis. In the face of such adversity, even the strongest of spirits could falter, and the brightest of hopes could dim. The doctors, determined to help him, initiated a last-ditch effort. A tube was inserted into his abdomen with the aim of draining the toxins. But this was a mere stopgap, akin to using a band-aid on a gaping wound. It could buy him a few hours, but they were racing against time, and time was not on their side. The odds were stacked against him. He needed weeks to recuperate, to gather enough strength to survive an appendectomy, but all he had were hours. As the poison spread, unchecked and unchallenged, his life hung precariously in the balance. The hospital corridors echoed with hushed whispers, prayers whispered fervently, hope clung on to desperately. His wife Sherry, his constant pillar of support, rushed to his side. Friends and family gathered, their faces etched with concern, their hearts heavy with fear. Each goodbye whispered, each blessing imparted was tinged with a sense of finality. But amidst the despair, there was Franny, resolute in her faith, unwavering in her belief. She clung to the divine message she had received. In her heart, she knew that Pastor Dave's story was far from over. Without the operation, Pastor Dave was destined to succumb to the poison consuming his body. But could faith and divine intervention pen a different ending to his story? Sherry hurried to the hospital, urging everyone we knew to arrive immediately. The hospital room was soon filled with a somber symphony of whispered prayers, tearful goodbyes, and quiet murmurs of comfort. One by one they came, expressing their love, their sorrow, and their hope. Yet amidst the solemn atmosphere, one voice rang out with an unexpected note of conviction. With David's prayer at the forefront of my thoughts and Franny's peculiar message, I countered it with everything I had. I prayed out loud, "Oh Lord, you are a shield around me." I kept doing it until I could no longer stay awake. I woke up the next day and saw the ceiling tiles. And the day after that, only one other patient with cancer similar to mine had survived a burst appendix for as long as my doctors and nurses could recall. When I passed the 1-week mark, I was sent home by a social worker. They gave me instructions to return for blood tests every few days to determine my suitability for surgery. There was no assurance that I would. I loved every second I spent with my family. In bed, Sherry read to me. We laughed, sang, and played piano together until I was unable to open my eyes. I even cuddled on the couch with our dog for a while. I prayed for my children as if it were my last chance, laying my hands on their heads. Lord, let all heaven break loose upon them as they fulfill their destinies. Every morning after Sherry helped me get out of the shower, I would look in the mirror at the chemotherapy ports and tubes protruding from my chest. I looked like the Terminator on a bad day. Surprisingly, I managed to survive for 6 weeks. My platelets returned to normal. I was prepped for the procedure by the surgeon. He declared, "I'm going to perform an exploratory procedure. We must assess the extent of the damage." Amidst the fog of anesthesia, I recalled David's remarks. Franny nor I could quite understand what they meant. However, that passage had kept me going like food in a barren winter. "You are a shield around me." Sherry squeezed my hand as I opened my eyes to the hospital ceiling tiles. Franny came back to see how I was doing. She had stood steadfast in her faith. She was a beacon of unyielding belief in the divine message she had received. Her eyes sparkled with an inner light as she held my hand, her voice steady and strong, echoing through the sterile hospital room. "Pastor Dave," she declared, "the Lord is your shield. He's not done with you yet." Her words were not a desperate plea, but an affirmation of deep-rooted faith. She believed in the power of God, in the miracles the Lord could perform, and in the message she'd been given. Her faith was a rock amidst the storm, a lighthouse guiding the way through the darkness. She held on to her faith, even as others began to falter. She held on to the promise of the Lord's message, even as reality threatened to tear it apart. She held on to the belief in miracles, even when they seemed impossible. In the face of imminent loss, Franny's faith remained unwavering. Her belief in the divine message was not just a comfort to her, but also a beacon of hope for others in the room. Her conviction resonated, echoing through the hospital room, inspiring others to hold on to their faith, to believe in the possibility of miracles, and to trust in God's divine plan. But for Pastor Dave, the reality of his situation was too overwhelming. The fear, the pain, the uncertainty all weighed heavy on his heart. He appreciated Franny's faith, her conviction, and her unwavering belief in the divine message. Yet he lacked the courage to share in her conviction, to believe in the miracle she was so certain was coming. Pastor Dave lacked the courage to tell her otherwise. In seminary, Pastor Dave learned that fear is not an emotion, it's a spirit that can consume you, silence you, and distort your reality. As he lay on the sterile hospital bed, the spirit of fear began to whisper in his ear, painting pictures of a future he was not part of. The fear was overpowering, a relentless onslaught of haunting images. He envisioned Sherry, his wife, alone at home, summoning all her strength to keep the family together, a solitary figure in the midst of the chaos they used to navigate together. He saw his daughter, radiant in her wedding gown, walking down the aisle without him by her side, a bittersweet symphony of joy and loss. He watched his sons playing, their laughter echoing in a world where he no longer existed. Pastor Dave was in a battle, a struggle not of the body but of the mind and spirit. On one side was his faith, the shield that had always protected him, the light that guided him through the darkest of times. On the other side was fear, a spirit so potent it threatened to extinguish that light. His faith told him to trust, to believe in the divine plan, to hold on to the reassurances of his congregation, and the divine message passed to him through Franny. But fear told him to despair. Fear told him to surrender, to accept the grim reality that his doctors painted for him. It was a struggle that tested him to his core. Fear was a formidable opponent, its whispers loud and insistent, its images vivid and terrifying. But Pastor Dave was not a man to back down from a fight. He clung to his faith, to the message of hope that had been delivered to him, to the love that surrounded him from his family and congregation. He knew he had to make a choice, to let the spirit of fear consume him, or to hold on to his faith, to trust in the divine intervention that had been promised to him. It was a struggle, a battle of epic proportions, and this evil spirit of fear spoke louder. But Pastor Dave was ready to fight back. He decided he wasn't gonna doubt anymore, and he held on to that message and kept shouting it aloud, "You are a shield around me, O Lord." Just when everything seemed to be at its darkest, Pastor Dave's life took an unexpected turn. Against all odds, his body began to rally, the toxins began to recede, his vital signs stabilized, and his strength started to return. The doctors were astounded. They had seen patients recover from the brink before, but never like this. It was as if a divine hand had reached down and pulled Pastor Dave back from the precipice of death. This miraculous recovery was more than a medical marvel. It was a testament to the power of faith, the strength of the human spirit, and the incredible ways in which God's hand works in our lives. The words that Franny had shared, "You are a shield around me, O Lord," resonated with a deeper meaning. They were no longer just words from a psalm, but a divine prophecy that had come to pass. Pastor Dave's life was irrevocably changed by this experience. He emerged from his ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding and connection with God. His faith, which had been tested in the crucible of suffering, emerged stronger and more profound. He became a beacon of hope to his congregation and an inspiration to all who heard his story. This incredible testimony of divine intervention serves as a powerful reminder to us all. It reminds us that, even in our darkest hour, we are never alone. It teaches us that faith is not just about believing in the unseen, but also about trusting in the divine plan that God has for each of us. It shows us that miracles do not belong to the distant past, but are happening right here, right now, in our everyday lives. From the brink of death, Pastor Dave was given a second chance at life. His story stands as a testament to the power of faith and the incredible ways in which God's hand works in our lives. It serves as a beacon of hope, reminding us all that even in the face of insurmountable odds, miracles can and do happen. The Lord was truly at work, proving that miracles do happen today. Hit the like button if this truly inspired you. Stay tuned for part 3, and remember to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Until next time, stay faithful, troops. Pick up your cross and continue to fight the good fight, and remember, you have Christ on your side.